Hey folks, it's Andrew, and let's talk about lesson design. So I was asked to turn this portion of a presentation that I made into a freestanding video. And I've given this presentation in a couple of different contexts. One as an exploration of formative assessment, which you'll see as we go through this. The other as an exploration of universal design for learning. And the context behind that is, one of the essences of universal design for learning is the need for flexibility, the ability to create alternative ways for the students not only to engage the learning, but also to show how much learning they've done. And throughout this presentation as well, you'll see how I build opportunities for alternatives and flexibility into this way of looking at lesson design also. As a disclaimer, I am not claiming that this is the only way to look at how a lesson can get designed or built, nor am I necessarily making the claim that this is the best of among the available options. What I am claiming is that this is the way my mind conceptualized the way a lesson gets built, and it provides a lens through which you can evaluate whether or not your lesson is doing what it needs to do. So in general, we look at lessons in three different ways. We look at the introductory piece, the experience you're giving the students to initially start the lesson, the teaching and learning time, where you build a series of activities for the students so that they can explore new content, and some sort of an assessment at the end. But in most cases, we all understand that this is just too simple a way to look at how a lesson gets built. For starters, it's very possible that there is some prerequisite knowledge or understanding that your students need to come in with in order to best explore the new content. And I will argue that it's best not to assume that the students all understand what they should understand coming in. You have to check for that. And it's possible that you, as the teacher, need to engage some prerequisite review. But you don't know that right away. So generally, as part of the introduction, it's useful to collect some sort of an artifact to reveal to you whether or not the students have the necessary foundation to engage the new content. Okay, and understand that when I say artifact, I'm talking about anything where when the students are exploring content, they leave behind evidence of what they know and what they don't, what they understand, what they don't, what their strengths are, what they're struggling with respect to the content that you're going to be exploring that day. So based on the evidence you collect in those various artifacts that the students leave behind from the introductory experience, you will find out whether or not you need to do prerequisite review or not. So then you'll move into the teaching and learning time. But here again, I would argue that this is just too broad a category to talk about in and of itself. Generally, we're going to look at this in two chunks. The brand new content that the students are learning, which is usefully taught using high engagement direct instruction, and the deeper explorations of that content that you want the students to do in a more independent way, often as guided practice or some sort of a deeper exploration. That has to be engaged when the students are ready to engage it. And it's not always immediately obvious as you've gotten through a direct instruction chunk whether or not the students are ready to move on to the more independent exploration. Here again, you may need to do a reteach, but you won't know that unless you collect another artifact. And so by building into your direct instruction the opportunity for the students to not only be engaged, but be engaged in such a way that they're leaving behind artifacts for you to look at as evidence, you'll be able to tell whether you need to go into additional reteaches of that new content or whether the students are prepared to move on to the more independent exploration. And generally at the end, you'll collect an additional set of artifacts as a way of gathering evidence of the student learning through the more independent learning time. Now, I've been choosing to use the word artifact in place of the more common word assessment because the word assessment not only tends to narrow people's vision of what it is I'm actually talking about, but it also can be fairly frustrating that I'm going to give 3 different assessments during this lesson sounds different than saying I'm going to collect artifacts strategically in 3 different spots. Make no mistake, this is what formative assessment is. It's the collecting of evidence of student learning during the course of the learning so that the teacher has time to change her mind about whether or not she wants to move on with the new instruction or go back and review what had previously been taught for the sake of the students being able to move on more effectively when the time comes. So one thing to consider with respect to alternatives and flexibility is what types of artifacts are common for you to collect, and how many different types of artifacts could you conceivably collect to provide flexibility and alternatives depending on the content or the student need. And that includes considering both digital opportunities and analog opportunities. And I'll say here, not for the last time, that the goal of this isn't for you to provide infinite numbers of opportunities for any given lesson. The point is for you to be familiar with enough variety of artifact collecting tools, strategies, experiences, etc., for you to be able to pair well the types of artifacts you're collecting with the content and also pair it with the needs of the students. But let's go back and explore the teaching and learning experiences that are being built. That is the introduction, the new content time, and the independent deeper learning time. For clarity's sake, I'll state my position that when students quit doing things, they generally quit learning things. So maximizing their learning during the teaching and learning time often is functionally equivalent to maximizing the amount of time they spend actively exploring the content. This is an additional target for alternatives. So considering what types of doing your students typically do during the learning experiences you build for them is a great way to spend some time considering how you might build some flexibility and some alternatives into your lesson build. And I want to restate for clarity that the goal of this is not for you to throw in 50 different types of artifact collections and learning experiences into every lesson. The point is for teachers to be as comfortable as possible with as many different types of artifact collection and teaching and learning experiences as possible so that teachers are best able to consider the needs of the student and the type of content and bring those various tools into play according to the best fit in any given situation. So that is one way to conceptualize the way a lesson gets built, and one way to look at formative assessment and universal design for learning. Please feel free to ask any clarifying questions, to push me back for the things that I've said that you think are incorrect, and to offer clarifying questions so that at the very least I can clarify my own thinking. Please feel free to reach out, and I look forward to seeing you around.